Well, good morning, everyone. If you're watching this, you're at home on your couch, watching the snow outside, and I'm with you because we're recording this beforehand just in case it snows. I'm Joe Castronova. I'm the lead pastor at Reality, and I'm really glad that all of our church family, we've tuned in together here this morning, and all of you that are welcoming us or coming in and seeing what we're about here online for the first time, welcome. We're so glad that you're with us. You're joining a church family that right now is in a process of doing what we believe is the most important thing we could do to start off a new year. And every year we have goals and New Year's resolutions, and we're committed to those things. And then about this time, those things start wearing off a little bit. And if that's you, you're not alone. Many of us are experiencing that. Snowstorms kind of mess up some of our habits as well. But as a church, we're committed to pursuing God. And this series is all about doing that. And so we've been learning lots of different things about that. And we actually have something really neat coming up that I want us all to get ready for. Next week, when you come into church at Lancaster City and at Hempfield locations, we want you to be ready to have your picture taken. And the reason why is because we want to get your face on a little photograph, and we want to start praying for you, and we want to pray for each other. We want to be a church family that prays for each other. And so we're going to be sharing some more details about that, but I want you to be ready for that because in this time that we're pursuing the Lord, we want prayer to just continue to be first and foremost in our minds for that. So this morning, I'm really excited to talk with you guys about this because we're going to talk about another part in our series, how we can get closer to God in an area that I've experienced my life being changed in a pretty big way here over the last 6 months. It's called the Sabbath. And I might say that, and you might be hearing that today and saying, okay, I'm going to switch over to another church. I don't want to learn about Sabbath. That seems like a topic that is just well outside of what I'm interested in. And I was just like that too. When I heard about Sabbath over the last 27 years or so that I've been a Christian, I just tuned it out. I didn't want to hear it. It was something that I was just not interested in. I had too many things to do. It seemed just so worthless to me to think about taking a block of time, like 24 hours, and pausing and resting and letting that be between me and God. And I've always loved God since that time, since I became a Christian. I've been pursuing him all these years, but Sabbath has been something that I've been ignoring until recently here this summer. But I have to tell you guys, if you get a hold of this, if you stay with me through this message here this morning, especially towards the end, you're going to see some things and maybe discover some things that God has for us in this whole idea that can be a life changer. So what we've been looking at in this series is a very unique aspect of how we get closer to God. We've been looking at this idea that our desires actually lead us in life. We think as people who are following Jesus or who are thinking about following Jesus, we think that it would be all about what we believe that leads us in life. But what we've been looking at is how it's actually so much about what we desire. You guys might remember that last week, Pastor Lindsay had on the stage here, she had some vegetables, and then she had some chips and salsa. And she said, if it was on our kitchen island and she was hungry, she would choose the chips and salsa over the veggies every single time, basically, pretty much, right? And a few weeks ago, I shared, Oreos versus vegetables, because when those two options are before me, I desire Oreos way more than veggies, most of the time anyway. There's this thing inside of us that even though we believe vegetables are better for us, even though we know the science and that it's true, we go after what we desire. So what we've been looking at as a church family is how can we actually allow our desires to line up with what we believe? How can we allow God to come in and shape what it is that's in our hearts that we want? Because we know it has such power in our lives to lead us and to take us down all kinds of paths and journeys and different patterns that develop in our minds, way more than just what we believe. So I want to show you guys some neat things here this morning. We're going to get into the Bible here today. We're going to go all the way back to the second chapter in the Bible and look at some verses throughout and then what Jesus said about it, about a Sabbath and how it's designed to do this, to cultivate our hearts in a way where our desires actually increase for God. And I think this one of all of them is the key to us having our lives actually be hungry and more desiring for God. So follow along with me on the screen. It's Genesis 2, verse 2. It says this. It says, by the seventh day, God completed his work, which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work, which he had done. So right away, verse 2 there, I love to read the scripture, and I love to ask questions as I'm reading it about what is it saying. So, we could just read it on the surface. It says, on the seventh day of God's creation, he rested, and many of us know that story, and it just seems very kind of normal to us. But then he's going to talk about the seventh day being restful and how there's a blessing in it. But I just want us to look at verse 2 again. Look at what it says. It says, he completed his work which he had done. Because I think all the years that I read that, I thought, okay, God got all of the work that was out there and available to get done. And then, so everything was complete, so now he could rest. And as I looked at that again, I thought, okay, well, is that really what happened? Well, it is. God got all the work that he had before him complete. So, and it says, then he rested. But then I asked myself a question: who determined how much work God had to do? Who was it that decided how much work God had to do when he was in this creation time, and he did it for 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh? And we know it was God that determined that, right? He said, this is how much work I'm going to have to do. He could have made it 8 days or 10 days. He could have made it 2 months, and then I'd take a rest for a day. But God said, in 6 days, I'm going to do work. And then I'm going to decide how much work I have to do. And then on the seventh day, I'm going to use that as a day of rest. And so I thought about a question that we just want to ask ourselves today. Who decides how much work you have to do in any given week? Who makes up the decision for how much work that you have to get done? And there's lots of things we could start thinking about as we think about, well, who makes up how much work we have? Many of us think, well, nobody does. I just have so much stuff to get done that there's just no way I can get all my work done in 6 days and then rest in the seventh. And that sometimes maybe in our lives, it feels like that's the case. But when you stop and think about it, you say, okay, well, first of all, in my job, how much work do I have to do in my job? And if any of us have bosses that have us working 70 hours or 60 hours on a regular basis where it's just like you never have enough time to get your work done, and they're pretty demanding about it, then there might be something there that you want to change, because that's not reasonable. Most of us have jobs that we decide outside of that 40 hours, how much work are we going to get done? And then we say, okay, well, what about when we go home? All the housework that has to get done, all the car maintenance, all the snow that piles up in our driveways that needs to be shoveled. Who determines how much work gets done there, how much work we have to do there? And probably that's most of us, right? Don't we decide how clean our houses are going to be, how perfect things are going to be, how much the beds are made or not made? We make up so many decisions about how much we have to do in any given week. In fact, God has delegated to us how much work we have to do. Now, there's seasons in our lives where that becomes a lot more challenging. And if you have younger kids that are crawling on your laps right now and making a lot of noise or crying because they want to eat or get changed, it could feel like it's 24 hours a day just getting work done because you're taking care of your kids. Or some of us have aging parents. And it's so demanding on us to take care of our mom and dad who we love. And those types of things are difficult. They're a bit out of our control. But most of the time, in the middle of things like that, we can decide how much work we have. We can decide the limits that we have to what needs to get done. In fact, I think God actually calls us to do that. And then go on in the next verse in Genesis, it says, on the seventh day, God blessed the seventh day. And he sanctified it, because on it says, he rested from all his work, which God created and made. Right? And again, at the end of this verse, it said he rested from all his work, which God created and made. And I read that, studying for this, like God created and made the work that he had to do. He decided that. And then I thought, okay, how seriously do I take God when he says he blessed the seventh day, he sanctified it, because on it he rested from all his work which he had created and made. And I thought, okay, God says that there's a blessing on this day. And as I processed this and moved into actually starting to practice Sabbath here back in June, I was like, I'm missing out on a blessing from God because I'm too busy making up how much work I have to do. I'm too busy staying so focused and driven on things that I don't need to be so focused and driven on. Because he says he blesses it, he sanctifies it. And what I'm beginning to discover as a person who's walking in the spiritual practice for the first time in my life, been a Christian all these years and I've been ignoring God about it, you guys, is I'm beginning to experience that God's blessing is on my life in different ways when it comes to things like my relationships. Your relationships that you have with people that are in your life that you love. He's going to begin to bless a part of that relationship when you slow down and you actually have a day that you're spending part of that with the people that you love. I'm finding that God is blessing my finances in a new way because 6 days I might be spending money, sometimes maybe more than I should, but on that seventh day I'm resting. And it's almost like my finances have gone from a 6-day week from a 7th-day week to a 6-day week in different ways. I'm finding that God is blessing me physically. Because you guys, I like to exercise. It's difficult though to stay on a pattern, especially in this winter. And I've been putting on a few pounds and not doing the things I need to do in that way. But on that 7th day, on that Sabbath for Joellen and I, we're finding it's a time for us where we exercise together. And then spiritually and emotionally, all the things I'm thinking about all week long, there's a day for all that sediment that's, in the water. You see dirty water and has to settle. Things just kind of settle down. And the best part of Sabbath for me has been just these last hours where it's like I'm at peace more than I am any other time in the week because I'm beginning to trust God when he says, I'm going to bless you. This is something important. I want you to pull back the work that you're doing and trust me to rest in this 7th day. So a couple of things. We see God, he created the Sabbath to lead us into limits and priorities. And Joellen and I find that on the Sabbath day is one of the best times for us to connect with each other, to look each other in the eye, and to say, okay, what's happening when it comes to our finances? What are the priorities coming up for a week? Talk about different things with our kids that we love, for each other, talk to each other about stuff that we want to, improve upon or that we're celebrating. He gives us limits and priorities when we practice Sabbath. And the other thing that happens is Sabbath reveals to us what we really trust and desire. Because if you're like me and you're thinking about this morning, like what would it be like to actually 6 days, you're thinking, what am I going to have to give up? What's not going to get done? How is it going to appear that I'm making progress? Or what is it that could be less than what it's supposed to be if I give this day up to God and I just trust him at his word and actually rest in it? And in the beginning, you guys, this is something that's really difficult for many of us because we have so many patterns in our lives that we've developed and ways of thinking and operating and living in life. And this is so countercultural to things around us to actually rest. And so it's hard at the beginning. But what you're going to notice when you do it and you start feeling some pain in it inside, some fear in it, you're going to notice what it is that you really desire. What is it that you really trust in, that you're used to pursuing and going after? And you're going to allow those things to come to the surface, and as they come to the surface, you're going to begin to move in a way where God can deal with those things and move you closer to him. Now, I want to just mention one other thing, because some of us would say, well, Joe, I'm not busy. In fact, it feels to me like I've got Sabbath 5 days a week. And you might be in a spot where you're used to just sort of camping out someplace alone, or you're stuck on a habit of video games. For you, life is just all about being comfortable and arranging your life in a way where you're not putting yourself out there in any way at all other than what you absolutely have to. But I would tell you that in the same way that some of us are working too hard and are so consumed with making progress in different things, for you, you're actually working at something that I believe the Lord wants to reorient in your life. He wants to break in your life the pattern of just the comfort being your God. And Sabbath is an opportunity to do that, to rest from those things that are keeping you from the life that God has from you, and to begin to step out of that into a new world of connecting with God. Now, there's a story in the Old Testament that's pretty fascinating to think about as it comes to Sabbath, and it's the story of the Israelites when they were in slavery in Egypt. Do you guys remember that story? When it was 2 million people for over 400 years, were stuck in slavery. And as time went by, God said, that's enough. And he raised up this leader in Moses. And Moses said to Pharaoh, let my people go. And eventually, after Pharaoh had to go through all kinds of difficult things, he let the people go. Well, this 2 million people head out into the wilderness. And all of a sudden, they were so used to having everything provided for them. Now, slavery is one of the worst things we could ever imagine, right? But the one side of it that created pathways in the way the Israelites thought was they were used to having their food, medicine, anything that they needed to live was basically given to them in all that hard work that they were experiencing. Now, all of a sudden, they're out on their own. And I can imagine if I was a part of that group of people during that time, that I would think that I have to work really hard to provide for myself. I've got to make sure that I'm getting everything that I need so I can survive because I'm out in the wilderness. I don't have anybody to take care of me anymore. And I think God saw that too. So he set this thing up where they were really hungry and manna started coming from heaven. It was this bread that they would eat. And God said, for 6 days, you can gather up this manna to eat. And he's going to keep providing for them. And he said, but on the 7th day, what I want you to do is to collect enough on the 6th day to provide for you enough to eat on the 7th. They had to trust God in that way to do that. And in doing so, what was happening was not only was God retraining them to trust him each day, way out of something they could control. This manna just showed up. He was moving them to be reoriented to where every part of their life was actually involved with trusting the Lord. And I believe Sabbath is practice for that. It's where we tangibly say once a week, we're going to stop for a period of time. And I'm talking about 24 hours, you guys. You might say, well, I could start with 2 hours and that's fine. Or you could start with 6 or 8 or a half day. But he said it's practice for us to put limits on our life, to trust God with the rest of our lives. And what it does is it asks us this question. It says, do we trust God enough to stop? Do we trust him enough to stop? Where we say, okay, God, you say you're going to bless my life. You're going to bless the things that I'm involved with, my relationships, my finances, my job, all those things, my body, right? We're saying, God, if I give you this day, then on the other 6 days, you're going to make my life better than if I took 7 days under my own control and I tried to figure everything out for myself in 7 days. I'm going to give this one day to you, God, and I'm going to trust you with the other 6. I was thinking this is so much similar to the tithing concept, which, is an amazing concept in the Bible. When you begin to study it and understand it, it's really hard when you're not used to it. Tithing is this idea that we take the income and we practice that God, he's given us the ability to earn our income, that everything we have is from him. And we say the first 10% of that, we're going to give to the local church. We're going to give into the church that we're a part of. And we believe that if we do that, what the Bible teaches is that God will bless the rest. So in other words, the scripture teaches that if you trust God with 90% by giving him the first 10%, he's going to do more with that 90% than what you could do with 100% under your own control. That same concept with finances that's so tied to our hearts, God takes to our time, to our motivations, to all the things that we try to figure out on our own. And he says, give me this one day, start your week off with it. And trust me that the rest of the time, I'm going to do something better with those days than what you could do if all 7 were under your own control. Guys, in all these patterns, both with our finances, with tithing, with practicing the Sabbath, we're allowing God to free us from the slavery of having to control everything ourselves. The patterns that take us into all those desires that pull us away from God. And we're trusting what God says, that he has a better way. Now, it's so neat because Jesus comes on the scene and he redefines the structure of Sabbath and brings heart to it. He takes what was practiced for thousands of years and just being a day where it almost feels like when you first hear it, you got to just suffer with God. You got to sit there and be bored. Don't do anything that's fun. You just have to pray and read the Bible all day, which sounds absolutely horrible to most of us. Jesus takes that and he gives life to it with the way that God describes. He still says it's good to set aside time where you're resting, but he gives life to it. In fact, he describes it this way, Matthew 2, verse 27. He says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. He says it was made for us. God has given it to us as a way to bless us. And then he takes the Sabbath and he begins to explain his heart to us. He shows us how it's made for people. And what you can see from how Jesus operated in the Sabbath is that it's meant to be all about rest and pleasure, limits and boundaries in our lives. Not some kind of religious exercise that we're supposed to practice, that at the end of that 24 hours, we are so sick and tired of Sabbath. It's where we can't wait to get to Sabbath each and every week. It's the highlight of our weeks. And so I want to share with you guys a little bit about what that looks like. But just to start in that, Sabbath, we ask, what helps me notice and enjoy God? What helps me notice that? We ask that question. We planning to get closer to Sabbath. We ask, what helps me experience renewing pleasure in my life? What helps me enjoy people? So we plan for Sabbath, we ask these questions, and we go into it in a way where we begin to practice these things that we're going to set up. I'm going to describe those in a moment. And that's how we go through that 24 hours. Look at what it says in Hebrews 4, verse 9. It says, so there's still a rest for God's people like a Sabbath day. The person who goes into God's resting place will rest after doing his work, just as God rested after doing his work. So let us do our best to go into that resting place. Those people died in the wilderness because they didn't believe. So let us take care that the same thing doesn't happen to even one of us, doesn't happen to one of us. And I was reading this, I was like, okay, there's a part of me before experiencing Sabbath, I was dying. I wasn't physically dying, maybe, because actually studies, you guys, you know, this is crazy. Studies say that people that practice Sabbath in their life on a consistent basis live longer. You could check me out on that, but that's an amazing statistic to think about, that it actually physically impacts us like that. But there's a part of us that spiritually, emotionally, we're dying without having the type of rest that we are created to have. All right, so what do we do? Well, I want to describe to you what this looks like a little bit for Joellen and I, and how we set this up in our lives and what we are pursuing in it. And this has been so good for us, you guys. And I want you guys to have this. I want you to have this. It's like God has got this treasure sitting there for us. And I want you to begin to experience. And in fact, I want to invite all of us to try it between now and the end of February and see what happens. It's hard at the beginning, and then it gets really easy. But if you set it up right, you might find that it's actually pretty enjoyable right from the start. So Joanna and I decided we were going to do this. And here's just what it looks like in our family. And I'm talking about 24 hours again. If 2 hours is good for you, contextualize this for whatever works best for you. But what we do is that the day or two before the Sabbath, we get ready for it. So we start, cleaning the house, all the things that we would normally do. And for us, Sabbath is Friday night at 6 p.m. through Saturday night at 6 p.m. It works good for us because I'm at church and stuff on Sunday and all that. And if you're at church on Sunday, that could be Sabbath for you. But for me, it's work. All right, you guys know that you're work sometimes. I mean, I love you. You're great. I like the work, but you're work still. So we clean up the house. We go grocery shopping. We get our laundry done. We get some meals prepped because Sabbath includes things like really awesome food. So I like shrimp, and so I buy some shrimp a lot on Sunday or on headed into Sabbath. Get some shrimp, have some shrimp cocktail, whatever drink you like, you get that drink ready. So if you're a coffee drinker, you're used to during the week you might have 1 cup of coffee or 2 cups of coffee. On Sabbath, you could drink 4 or 5 cups of coffee. On Sabbath, when you wake up in the morning, you can have coffee, and this is if you don't have little kids at home at least, and you could go back to sleep. And in fact, if you're married and it's just the two of you in the house, you can go back to sleep together if you want. And I may or may not have done a study on this. Did a little ChatGPT action, Evan, to say, what's the correlation between people's reporting of their sexual, what's it called, guys? Intimacy or life or health and Sabbath. And you'd be surprised. You could check me on this. But ChatGPT says reported all these studies of how that part of our lives, guys, it increases when we have time to rest and be at peace with our spouse and look them in the eyes and talk about the hard things and work through the conflicts that are hanging on and just be together. All right, so we're going to get some food that we love, something special. We look forward to having it. Joanne and I often have a steak on Sabbath. That's normally how we have an earlier dinner. We'll have some steak. You plan to get some food, something, whatever you like to drink, whatever that means to you. Then how you maybe exercise. Even if it's just a walk, or you're going to go and get on a trail somewhere, or for her, Joanne and I would, in the summertime and spring and fall, we like to run, and so we'll go on a really long run together and just walk for part of it and then run, and it's just anything that brings you joy and pleasure in your life. You want to have it set up. You don't have to have a plan written down, but you can, and you want to move into those kinds of things and enjoying those types of things. If you're married together, if you're not, you find a friend to spend some time with, or you're just alone because that's what you need on any given Sabbath. Then Joanne and I will talk through financial things sometimes. We enjoy that, or goals that we have, or things with our children. But here's the thing, you guys, once that 6 p.m. hits on Friday, it's all about experiencing pleasure together or apart. It's all about moving into time, nothing that's about progress or any burdens. All those things can wait, and it's just a time for us to then invite God into those moments. So what we do is we have a candle, and this is so significant for me. I don't know why, you guys. I love it. And I have here this candle that, by the way, Calvin and Jacqueline has a little side hustle business going on, so a little plug for her. She makes these beautiful candles that have this pure stuff, so you can breathe it and it's not going to mess you up or be bad for you or whatever. And so you can get one of them from them if you'd like. But when we light this candle and the light comes into our kitchen on our island, it to us signifies the Holy Spirit's there. And I know the Holy Spirit's there, always there, and he's living inside of me all the time, but there's something about looking at the light and recognizes this time that's set apart to love the Lord our God and grow in loving him with all of our hearts, to connect together with the people that we love that are most important, and to take the things that we tend to hold so tight with and want to control ourselves and say, God, I'm going to trust you with this day, that if I do that, not only am I going to have a good day, but those other 6 days, there's going to be something better about it because I chose to give this day to you. And so we're experiencing that. And I want you guys to try it, because I think you're going to do it and you're going to like it. You're going to even come and give me a high five sometimes, because you're going to find this is a really good part of your life, all right? So here's what I wanted you to do. You're home on the couch right now, right? If you're married, we're going to finish with a song here in just a moment. This song is I want you to just let this song, the Lord just speak to your heart about it. And then when the song goes off and you're finished just connecting with God, I want you to take some time, have a conversation with your spouse. If you're alone, maybe pick up the phone or later pray to talk to a friend. And I just want you to explore what it would be like for you to try Sabbath. What would it look like? I encourage you to go after 24 hours, you guys. I encourage you to try it. But if you can't, what does it look like for 2 hours, for 4 hours, for 6 hours? If you've got little kids that are climbing all over, you're like, Joe, we can't, you guys, you're empty nesters. You don't know what it's all about. You're right. I probably forget. But I would say if you've got little kids, how can you get all the other things set up in a way where even with your little kids, you can enjoy Sabbath? So make a plan for it. Go for it in February. Say between now and the end of February, we're going to make this a part of our lives. Because here's the thing, you guys. And I know this is true because it was true for me. Many of us don't realize, but we're actually in slavery. We're in slavery to things in this world that we're not even aware of. Desires that come up in us, and we know what they are, that pull us away from God. We're not in slavery like the Egyptians were, where it's a government controlling us. But there are spiritual powers, I believe, in the heavenly realms that look at us and laugh hysterically because of how convinced we are that we've got to take care of everything ourselves. We've got to figure it all out. We've got to make sure that we're the ones that stay on top of everything when God makes it so clear in his word. He says, 6 days, go ahead and do your work, but take that seventh day and give it to me because it's sanctified, it's holy, and you're going to be blessed because of it. So let's experience this together. Let's invite the Holy Spirit into our homes and let the Lord lead us into new desires that we haven't yet discovered yet for him.
You unravel me with melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears have gone. I'm no longer slave to fear, for I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Your love has called my name, and I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins, and I'm no longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God. Oh, 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 you split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and say, I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. Oh, you rescued me so I could stand and say, I am a child of God. I am a child of God. I am a child of God.